Does that not occur to you? The light bulb moment for me was when I looked at this pathway and I thought I can do it. Not when it was like, I want to be a scientist. I never had that. I always just thought of it more, I can do this. This is interesting. This is the next step.
Ideas, by definition, are always fragile.
No tolerance for failure, no innovation.
The best ideas have to win.
This is the Synthesize Pod from Bright Idea. It's your weekly hit of insights and actionable strategies for innovation-minded professionals that just want to get shit done. Welcome to Season 1, Just Say Hackathon.
Hey, everyone. We are back with another Synthesize podcast, talking about hackathons again. And we have the lovely Liz Bright with us today to chat. Liz, you want to say hi?
Hello.
And Margaret, you want to say hi to the crew?
I'm back.
So, really excited about this episode. 3M looms very large in the world of corporate innovation. And of course, Liz has such a wonderful last name. Bright is a very important word in my world. But I figured we would start with kind of your personal journey. We were chatting about it a little bit before we started. And then maybe you'll pause and, I can add some color on 3M specifically. And then we can get into kind of day-to-day and things you're doing with hackathons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds great. So
right.
Where to start?
What's your life story?
Okay, yeah. So starting kind of way back, my dad actually used to own an upholstery shop. And so I feel like that's really relevant because I think having this creator mentality and having people around me making things all of the time, just being around someone who's constantly looking at things thinking I could make that. I could do better than that. I could personally improve the world, and just seeing all of these opportunities, like this could be cheaper, this could be better, this could have more pockets, whatever it is. I feel like that is just something that if I had nothing else, like none of the rest of it probably matters. It's just that idea that I can change things.
I think there's a Steve Jobs video out there that he's like, once you realize that all the stuff was made by people and you get to make stuff and you can make stuff better, it's kind of like the veil is pulled back and you see the world differently.
100%. I remember growing up, these shows of like how it's made, things like that. There's this one, I think it was Philosophy Beauty Products did one. And I just remember seeing the beautiful, like, scented soap swirling into these bottles, thinking someone designed the soap, the bottle, the label. It just really makes it clear that in a world where you just walk into something and pluck it off the shelf, that there's people behind all of that and you can be one of them. That is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Now, did you upholster any furniture? Did you build any things? Did you any projects from that phase of your life?
My first car. So my first car was a 1992 BMW convertible.
Nice.
To give
What
you
color?
context, I was not born that far before that car was. So it was white. It was white with a blue top. And So the upholstery was actually horrible. And my dad, plus my set of hands, kind of redid it. And we did like a blue and white two-tone. And one of my favorite memories of my parents actually is my mom sitting inside the car and my dad sitting on the outside and then passing a needle back and forth to sew in the back window.
Oh my God.
So
that's crazy. So you did the top as well as the seats, or what?
It needed a new headliner. It needed a new back window. That little piece of vinyl was like really yellow.
Yeah.
Being in the New Mexico sun really got to it. So I think that piece of it, like so many things needed to be redone. But at the end of the day, I had that car that people would just be standing by in the grocery store, usually kind of old guys, if you're like, checking it out.
Here's a conversation starter.
Totally. But I felt very cool, riding around with the top down.
And to be able to customize that yourself.
That's super cool. I don't even think people think about that with a car. I mean, it's one thing to have this antique chair in your living room, but to be like, oh, I'm just going to redo the seats of my car or the headliner of my car.
I know. I'm about to go look in my car and see how much of it is upholstered.
Totally. I think that mindset that's the glue, no matter what you do in life, if that's how you think, it's going to impact.
I had a sailing coach once, and he basically said, modify your boat. Like, too many people like just leave the boat as it is, but if you can actually make a tweak that like makes it faster or better, then just go do it, right? Like, and it was like same thing. It's like you almost need someone to like remind you that there's permission to do these types of things.
Yeah, that all these objects in our lives aren't static. They can be changed and molded and updated and improved.
Yeah. Okay. So then you were telling me earlier that you decided you had the sun was too much in New Mexico and you wanted to go somewhere really cold with a lot of snow.
I don't think I could be quoted to say that, but yes, I did. That is what I ended up doing, though. I went to University of New Mexico, stayed there quite a while, and then I was working in a startup. So we were doing eco-friendly wood stains and coatings, kind of a small team, and that's really when I realized that there's so much technical depth in the world of what I was trying to do. You can imagine pigments and the chemistry of it, and really the coatings industry had a pattern to it as well. Like, most people have PhDs that you're interfacing with. Most people really have a lot of technical depth in terms of like how thick the liquid has to be to go through all the processes and the fundamental science behind that. And I thought, if I'm ever going to be allowed to make any decisions here, I really do feel like I need to know more of the science. So I went ahead and like kind of begrudgingly applied to grad school and ended up loving it. Went to New Hampshire, and I was like 3 years into my program, and my advisor calls me in and he goes, Liz, have you ever considered, or would you want to do potentially an internship at 3M? My buddy is asking around. They need people with a certain type of experience, water-based adhesives, and you've made water-based things.
So just to go back a step, it was like a chemical engineering type thing? What was the master's degree in?
Yeah, so I just chemistry, polymer chemistry, and in chem usually, like unlike some other fields, you kind of do either a master's or a PhD. Mm-hmm. And the wink is that if at some point the PhD is not working out, you can kind of switch tracks. But so I went ahead right into the PhD program in polymer chemistry, kind of with the intention of studying things that could be potentially sustainable materials, plastic replacements, even things that could do water cleanup. Having clean water is something that's always top of mind in New Mexico. There's a lot of things with uranium and all of that other stuff that's like really was some research I did in undergrad, and I wanted to continue doing some sort of social good. Okay, cool.
So you were doing like water soluble chemical treatments, I guess. That's in addition to the clean water stuff.
That was the hope. I actually ended up studying something completely just fundamental science. So once I got started, I was, trying to find my way and pick an advisor. And that's one of your biggest decisions in grad school. Like, who's going to be my advisor? Because their research group dictates what you're doing. They're really getting funding to do your research. They're advocating for you. They're really shaping a lot of your future. So you got to pick your advisor. And so my advisor, the person that I wanted to work with, he did really fundamental science, not applied science like I thought I wanted to do at all. It was more like, here's a chain of polymers. How can we get it to fold in very specific ways? That's really all it was like, how do we learn how to better dictate what shape it takes?
And were you doing extrusions, or what was how was the plastic getting created basically?
So I was doing fun, like small polymerizations. So I was doing one chain at a time.
Wow.
Nanoscale, you build the chain and you try to control how long it's going to be, kind of organic chemistry. Think cooking, like really, like imagine your kitchen. And, you're starting with like a pot of things and you're adding stuff into it. I always felt a little bit like a mad chef when I was in grad school. But yeah, nanoscale, hard science, fundamentals.
You're like not a mad scientist, a mad chef doing science.
Yeah, totally.
To look at the morphology after the fact, were you doing microscopy, or how are you looking at the chains after you kind of, developed your production process?
Totally. So because we were doing things on the like single chain scale, like one chain, and I had, milligrams of material, sometimes like 10 milligrams of material.
Mm-hmm.
Characterization's hard. Like you have to kind of invent ways of characterizing and then prove that those ways work. You have to invent the whole chain from like, how do I make this to how do I test it? And so we did, small angle X-ray scattering. So that's a kind of a method for just bouncing some light off of your chain and seeing where the light goes, and then sort of divining, all right, this is the shape I've got. We did nuclear magnetic resonance. So this is like kind of like taking an MRI and seeing, okay, when you take an MRI, it moves all the water around in your body. And that tells you, okay, this tissue, the water moves this quickly. This tissue, the water doesn't move as quickly. It's kind of the same thing. Like in this chain, if it's really bound up, that's going to behave differently than if you haven't folded it at all.
I feel like anytime I talk to a PhD, they just have like 5 levels up of quantitative, like analytical capability. I mean, when you were sewing your BMW, did you feel like you always had that muscle, or was it something you kind of developed while you were in grad school?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for me specifically, because like in grad school, I bought a domain called notthesciencetype.com. Like really, like I am the poster child for someone who, did it, got interested in it, enjoyed it, got a ton of benefits from it, wanted to bring other people in, but somehow always felt like it wasn't a personality for me. It was a pathway. It was like, hey, you can do this. And I think kind of like with the car, where it's like you look at the thing and it's like, do you think you can upholster it or not? Does that not occur to you? The light bulb moment for me was when I looked at this pathway and I thought I can do it. Not when it was like, I want to be a scientist. I never had that. I always just thought of it more, I can do this. This is interesting. This is the next step. A little less like existential.
Well, that's interesting, though, because you obviously are a scientist, right? But if you don't feel like it's a personality trait, what would you say are your personality traits? Like, or do you just feel like you can walk through the world and almost explore whatever it is without taking it on as a personality?
I like to pretend it's more the latter. I like to pretend that I can just do whatever I want every day, right? But in terms of identity, I don't know for you too, but I feel like that act of creating is for sure something I identify with. Being curious and wanting that drive to create something, that drive to change it. I feel like I have an arts and crafts like side of me that does a ton of projects, and I think that is core to me, that I'm always going to be making stuff and trying new things out.
And even creating yourself, it feels like the curiosity is even in, oh, I could do this. I could get a PhD and I could actually go from applied science to non-applied science.
Right. The fundamental, I think you're right though. Like the fundamentals all the way to the applied, I feel like it is kind of a playground if you think of it that way.
I think it's kind of a marvel that you're like, well, yeah, I didn't want to be a PhD, but I just kind of did it on the side for, while I was doing other stuff. And then I got back to what I really wanted to do. I mean, I think where most people with PhDs kind of feels out of reach, and to do that level of science is almost certainly out of reach for, I think, a lot of people. So very cool. So I guess one more question about the science phase. It sounds to me like you're working, almost in like the smallest petri dish possible, so that you could understand these connection points and understand the characterization methods so that they could be applied more broadly to, say, more complex chains and whatnot. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So are you kind of fascinated by the AlphaFold stuff? I don't know if you've looked at that at all, but like the Google AI for protein folding, have you kind of, now that I have an expert in front of me, I want to get their thoughts on it.
Totally. I think that area is so amazing for AI. I think when I was in grad school, the data science field was starting to become more in the popular lexicon. It was starting to come up, and there were a lot of people doing modeling when I would go to conferences. So the field that I was in was really informed a lot by, and I think in some ways lagging, the protein field. We were doing stuff that's so simple compared to what nature can do. So simple. We had like 3 to 4 building blocks total. Proteins just have so many, and then they have these different hierarchical orders of organization. So it's like, you know, what's on the chain in the first place? What are your building blocks? And then things like folding, right? Things like wrapping around and creating spirals, plus the folds, plus the... And so we were just at like the baby of... How do you even get these building blocks in order? How do you even do that? So I think for me, watching that field come up, watching AI come up and really become more accessible, I think there's going to be amazing things that happen in terms of drug delivery and specificity and hopefully theranostics. So therapeutic drugs that are also diagnostic. Like, do you have this issue? And then while we're there, let's solve it. If you do, I think being able to do that at the molecular level is going to just change so much of medicine. I know it'll change other things. I know we'll probably have better coatings for airplanes and solar panels and all of this great stuff coming out of it. But I think about the health things too. I think it's going to be amazing.
Okay, so then somehow you find your way to 3M. How did that happen?
Yeah. So I wasn't thinking about it too much. I was 3 years into what should be like a five-ish year program. And my advisor pulled me in and he said, you know, you ever thought about doing an internship? Would you maybe be interested in 3M one day? There might be some good opportunities there. And I said, without thinking, yeah, of course. And then I didn't think about it for like months. You know, I was doing my thing. I had the undergrads. I was doing some research. And I got a call from a Minnesota phone number. I think I was at getting an oil change. So I'm like getting an oil change. I get a call from a Minnesota phone number and pick it up.
And you picked it up, which is
bizarre.
incredible.
Yeah. I never do that. I think most of us today, if you see an unknown number, that's
not a chance.
Voicemail. But I don't know. Maybe I was bored. I don't know. So I pick up the phone and it's like, hi, this is Corinne from 3M. Do you have some time to talk today? And I'm like, sure. So we're talking and it turns into pretty much an interview. It really does. Like your interests, some of the science things, what do you know about emulsion polymerization, the whole thing. And then she sends me a
questions.
Link. Totally. Just a couple light, friendly, getting to know you.
Like oil changey questions.
Yeah.
Totally. I think we talked for like half an hour and it got pretty technical. And it turns out she's a technical manager in the corporate materials lab studying water-based chemistries. So she became my internship manager and I came over and did an internship that summer. So I will say it kind of found me. I want no divination there. I was like, I am going to finish grad school. That's my main thing. I don't know what's going to happen after that. Maybe I'll teach. I need to start looking in earnest next year. That's kind of where my head was at. And this opportunity came by and I just grabbed it.
And were you aware of kind of 3M's reputation in that space and more broadly?
Vaguely aware. When I said yeah to my advisor, I was thinking, I know that company. I know some of the things they make, but I didn't have an intimate knowledge. By the time Corinne had talked to me, by the time she called me, I looked it up a little bit and thought, wow, it's a lot more than I realized. 3M does so many more things that I knew. And it's a much bigger company than I thought. I was thinking about Post-its and, tape, painter's tape, the consumer products. And that's like a tip of an iceberg for 3M. So I think I was thinking, honestly, it kind of made me more doubtful. Like, I'm never going to get that. That's a really cool company. That's the legitimate, that's the best case scenario that someone in my degree could probably land in. So we'll see. I'm not from a big brand name school. I'm not, the most competitive candidate here.
3M, from my standpoint, like looms so large in the space of, innovation, corporate innovation management. When I started studying it, there were a couple companies out there that were being really intentional about their innovation, and 3M was kind of the top of the list. I mean, for a while their public marketing was just 3M innovation. Like that was their tagline, just innovation. And of course, the Post-it note is an innovation in itself, and we can talk about how that all came to be. But then it's the tool that everyone was using to innovate, right? Like the iconic thing is you go into a room and you put a bunch of sticky notes on the wall, and official Post-it note sticky notes, that is.
Of course.
Yeah, no off-brand stuff.
Yeah, no
for
off-brand.
Innovation.
You got to get the real stuff. So I mean, I was like, at the time it was like, maybe Bell Labs, maybe, the Shell Game Changer program, and then 3M. 3M was a big early adopter of Stage-Gate process. More so than anyone, I think they were just kind of cognizant about cultivating it, and just, it's not just this thing that happens. It's like you can kind of do directed efforts to do that. So it's awesome to even be able to talk to someone who works at 3M from my perspective, because it's just such a cool company with that history. And I guess I'll say one more thing, like even the legacy is like the 3Ms were like the Minnesota mining and manufacturing company. One thing that 3M does better than almost anyone is the latitude in which they're willing to go. Like if you have a company that makes like car tires, and maybe they move into truck tires or something like that, some adjacent capability to their core competency. But I feel like 3M would be like, we can make bubble gum or something, and and just not even worry about, what they did. And it's like the innovation process itself is the core capability, not any particular, science or production process. Yeah, super excited to have you on and to just hear more about some of the things that are going on inside of 3M.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like you kind of nailed it. We really do have that same belief that as a company that I had as a kid, like, oh, I can do that. We really do have that spirit. And so for me, it's an honor being sort of a cultivator of it. And I really do feel like in the innovation community in 3M, which is almost all of us, like we are almost all engaged in that. We're almost all of us, at least some spark of a mindset of like, this should be possible. This should be different. This should be better. Why don't we do this? We have kind of a drumbeat there. So I think sitting in that role for me is an honor, and I really get to see that every day. And I can't imagine being somewhere where that wasn't true. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I can't really imagine not having that mindset or not having that grounding of, hey, we're inventing things here. It just is so empowering.
The thing that's interesting to me hearing you talk about your kind of trajectory is that you have this attitude of like, sure, I can do it, or I can figure it out. But it sounds like once you got to this 3M opportunity, you were like, there's no way I'm going to get that.
Totally. I thought it was so intimidating.
What do you think like the hurdle was when you were like, yeah, sure, I could get a PhD, yeah, sure, I can do that. Like, what was it that you were like, oh, I'm probably not going to do that?
I think it's the brand name. I think that, I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school. Setting the stage there. So this idea that I can apply somewhere, it was always somebody that shepherded me in. The startup that I was at was a friend told me, hey, come do this. And I did. And then when I was there, I would see things that needed to be done and I would just try to go do them. That was kind of what led me through. And 3M was the first thing that happened pretty similarly, right? Someone told me, hey, go do this. This might be an opportunity. But then once I realized how competitive it would have been had I been applying to it cold, and it is still a competitive thing. I just was blind to that. I was a little bit sheltered from the inner workings of that. And I don't think that if I had to apply by looking up companies and then finding the top 10 for innovation and then figuring out how to tailor my resume to that and then trying to network. And I just think that whole process would have been really scary. And I'm grateful, very grateful that even though I went through it with guidance, with a mentor, with that kind of sheltered me from the noise that it can be like when you're applying to something cold. And I will never, ever, ever forget that. I try to do a good focus on mentoring and bringing people in to things that they're genuinely interested in, because I know that would have just been absolutely shocking. Like we do something every so often called rapid recruiting. And that's where you bring top candidates, they usually have done a postdoc or at least a PhD, and they're from like really competitive schools, and they give a talk on what they've done, and then they go through and interview with different business groups and with the corporate labs. If I would have had to do that, like I watched it, if I would have had to do that, I would have like, no, thank you. I would like to go start a pancake house. I'm out. So,
is that the retirement goal, pancake house?
No, but I think everyone does keep, especially mid-grad school. I think if you polled the grad students of the world out there right now, almost all of them would have something. Like, I don't know, mine at the time was like, maybe I'll go be a farmer. I think that was an appealing thing for some reason. Like, I'm going to go cultivate, hops, or I'm going to go do something. And I think it's just this yearning for a simpler life that you can have some sort of control over when you look at these big companies and their shiny, application pages. And sometimes you're just like, it would be nice if I could plant a few seeds, sweat a little.
I feel it in B2B SaaS too right now. Everyone's like, I'm just going to go be a potter. I'm going to go bake bread, I'm going to go use my hands and, do something simple.
Churn butter in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. I think we see so much of that with any of these high pressure situations. I think part of your brain is like, I need a fantasy.
Yeah.
Something that, I like to sew, and in grad school I made some yoga mat bags and sold them out of one of the just shops on the main drag. They sold crafts, and I think that kept me sane. Like, I think
you're like, I can always double down on the bag business.
On the yoga mat bag. Yeah. Hopefully yoga will really pick up.
It did.
So maybe we can jump into life at 3M. So did you went into a scientist role or an investigator role? Where did you start, and then how did you kind of navigate into your current role?
Yep. So my internship was in that materials lab. So Corinne, you end up listening to this. Hi, that was amazing.
Hi, Corinne.
Yeah. She was really cool. So she brought me into the materials lab, and I was doing coatings. So these coatings would go, it's the stuff that goes on the backside of tape so that the adhesive doesn't stick to the other side when it's rolled up. That's what I was working on.
Okay.
So just how do we make that more sustainable, all of that kind of thing. And so I did that for a summer. And then at the end of the summer, I interviewed with a couple of groups. And one of them was the stationery office supply division. And I got a job offer there. So I was so excited. The role was going to be product development. And all I had to do was go back, finish my PhD, make sure everyone signs it, committee signs it, and then go ahead and start the next summer. So that was amazing. I did one stint doing the more material side, and then I'd come back and work on products. So
you actually did that? You went back and finished up the PhD? Was it called, the dissertation? What's the final thing? Yeah. How did that go? Was that stressful?
It was hard. So remember the timing too. I had just finished my third year. So I had one more year to finish what should be a 2-year slog. And so I really, really had to crank if I was going to capitalize on this offer. Like, I was going to have to finish a year early. And so don't remember a lot of that year because it was like, I got to write everything. And, if you talk to people that have done a dissertation, especially in a physical science, you find that whenever you did the first 2 years, you usually need to redo by the time you get to that point, because you realize what your holes were. You realize you didn't this data file that you have like doesn't work or doesn't really have what you need, or there's a big hole in how you thought about it. Just your first couple of years are not your best work. You're just getting started. Yeah. So needing to redo experiments, needing to get more data, needing to find samples that have turned green somehow, like all of that kind of stuff, like so many little vials, just all these tiny little vials with like 10 milligrams of stuff in it. And you're like, please dissolve. When I put something in this to like put it into a characterization piece of equipment, I need it to dissolve. I have 10 milligrams, or it's going to take me 3 days to make that again. So that was what the last year was like. I wrote a dissertation, it's a multi-chapter book on single chain nanoparticles.
Can you tell us the title of your dissertation so that we're thoroughly impressed?
No, because I don't remember it. It's about single chain nanoparticles.
Okay.
And I remember my snappy title. I had a snappy title called Nano Knitting.
Okay. That ties it all together.
So that one I can share, is that our group liked to talk about nano knitting. And so that's what I tell people usually. But the secret is that I really don't remember.
Now I'm really going deep, but is there any correlation between actual sewing and like you don't like actually loop things and like, put the thing, like...
Ideally, you would be able to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Was I able to do anything like that? I think the closest thing I can say is that in sewing, when your machine jams, I did a lot of that. Like where you have made a mess and now you're going to curse at it and try to move on. So that's the closest thing I can say to real sewing, is like the frustration and the knots and the problems are kind of feel similar, honestly. Getting through a mistake that you've made crafting is pretty similar to working in a lab as a grad student, I would say.
What happens next? You drive to Minnesota? Do you fly to Minnesota?
Oh, I drive, yeah. I love my RAV. Actually, when I was an intern, I had one of the people that interviewed me, Willem, he put posted extreme note on the side of my car. And that car was there the whole year, survived the winter in New Hampshire, survived the drive to Minnesota back, and survived probably 5 or 6 months before I had to remove it. And it still didn't damage my paint. So I will say that
did he write, "You better come back"? Or what did he write? What was on this extreme note?
I think it was just like, "Thanks, Liz." I really do think it was like, "We're excited to have you." It was on the outside of a bag of goodies of 3M products that they gave me. And so I had that note the whole time, and it just stayed on my car through rain and blizzards and all kinds of crazy stuff. Started, pulled into that same parking lot with that same note and just got going. I worked on packaging tapes. I worked on box lock packaging tape and worked on the adhesive and got into product development.
Did it look a lot like the lab, or did you kind of shift into let's design the package and the, all that stuff?
Started out more lab, started out with, hey, our adhesive, we need to optimize it for this new product to stick to recycled boxes. So in the world of boxes, more and more of them are being recycled, which is fantastic. But the box fibers, like when you chop up a box to make a new box, the fibers are shorter and you have to put more filler in to get a box made. So we were thinking, okay, how do we make sure that in our new product, the tape works really well? So I worked on tape adhesive design and characterization and the claims. I love the claims world for just how do we tell consumers that in a couple of words. Right. So the people that designed the package put a big old lock on it. They put, guaranteed to stay sealed and some other things that communicate and translate that science into human words and visual language. So it was really cool to see that. But I was working really quite in a lab, like truly, you put the adhesive underneath a thing, you smush it, you see how smushy it is, you see what happens when you turn it, you see what happens, how long it'll hold. Truly a lab setting. So,
and this note that he put on your car, that was one of the projects you were working on?
No, I never worked on that one. The guy in the lab next to me had worked on the adhesive, and the coatings for the paper and all of that stuff. So it was fun to hear him. Down the hall, if you go down the hallway where we were at, we had people that had worked on so many different products. You could walk one end of the hall to the other and look at like double-sided tapes and our creativity portfolio and, you know, people that were working on scissors and testing scissors and people that are working on our dry erase and our easy erase products and, you know, cushion lock, which now is on the market. Cushion lock was being invented at the time. So I was working on...
What is cushion lock?
Cushion lock, yeah. So cushion lock is a replacement for plastic bubble. It is a protective wrap. It's flat on the roll, so it looks like a roll of paper, roll of brown paper. And when you pull it, there's holes and pieces of the paper orient, so they go up and down to give it like cushioning. Okay. And you can wrap items in it, and it sticks to itself. So cushion lock is 100% recycled product that replaces a plastic, and the cuts to it are called kirigami, and that the invention of that and the application of cut paper to a packaging was happening right there.
So that's that stuff where it's like brown paper and it's like in all little like rigid, like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like shredded, but it's all still one piece basically.
Yeah. It looks almost like a rooster crow thing. You know what I'm talking about? The crown?
Yeah. Okay.
It looks like that, where it's like there's pieces that really come out of the plane and provide that cushioning that you'd get from the bubble. It's kind of magic.
Got it.
I have so much to Google. I'm going to go down.
So much here.
I'm just going to be like searching for products on 3M's website, being like, I'm going to buy that and buy that.
You said something about creativity portfolio. What's that all about?
Yeah, so half of my job was, work on this adhesive. And the other half of my job was we were thinking, man, people are more and more getting into tapping into their creative side. What can we offer them? You know, we have so many adhesives. We already have a portfolio in creating and laminating. So we have like some scissors, we have washi tapes, we have things for journaling and things for scrapbooking. How do we go bigger on that and serve more of these people that are considering themselves makers? So that was my first front end kind of innovation project. I was on this team. We did some ethnography. We learned about the modern maker. I got to buddy up with our marketing friends and really study that and come up with some prototypes and, you know, do concept testing. So that was really my first foray there. And so we ended up scrapping the idea that I was working on, like many. So true front end, the whole way. You work on it, you fall in love with it, you fall in love with the people, you make some prototypes, and then, turns out it's nothing. So we did that.
How far did it go? You went to like concept stage, and did it go through a formal stage gate, or are you just kind of early idea stage?
So we got through a couple of gates. We got through a discovery gate. You know, is this a worthwhile problem to solve? Yes, we felt like it was a worthwhile problem. We made some concepts and got some, you know, quantitative understanding of those concepts and where the heat was. That was great. And then we made some prototypes, real things, got pilot scale samples done and sent them out for in-home use tests and got that back. And it was kind of funny because all the results, we had a benchmark, right? Like, people must love it this much. They must intend to repurchase it to this degree, right? And everything, like, of the 5 samples we sent was like right along that line. And so now that I'm a little bit more mature, I'm like, yeah, when you have no clear winner, it's really hard to move anything forward. It's really hard to make decisions when you have everything that's around the same and you don't have some resolution there. So that project was really just such a great teacher. And on the other side of my day, it's like, okay, this adhesive was this squishy and we need it to be this squishy. Let's squishify it more.
Are those the actual scientific 3M terms? Is it squishiness?
Yeah, more or less. we have one of the test methods that I was working on at the time. We bought something that is a texture analyzer, and the primary use case of it, I'm guessing, because the whole packet that came with the machine was talking about this, is basically looking at the texture of bread for like a Sara Lee or, some dough company.
Bounces
like,
it.
Is this the right? Yeah. So it goes down and it swishes it and it sees how swishy or not, how much force it takes to rebound and how long that rebound takes. And we did that for adhesives as well. So I think swishy is a perfectly appropriate word. It describes the test pretty well.
And you can do that at I assume very thin films. I mean, the smushy detector works whether it's a quarter-inch slice of bread or if it's just a thin film of adhesive.
Yeah, you have to be kind of clever about that, right? So there's with the tape, you have the adhesive and the backing. And so you have to look at what percentage is backing. So if you had a ton of adhesive on a tiny backing, less of a problem. When the backing is about as thick as the adhesive is, then you have to get a little bit clever about, telling that probe what to do and making sure the end of that probe is a sufficiently small size. And, there's engineering that goes into every single piece of how you substantiate a claim and how you measure things. So not unlike the single chain nanoparticle, right? You have to invent something, and then you have to invent how to test it, and then you have to be confident about that and look at the problems. And somehow it just turns into very strong tape on the package.
Marketing gets a hold of it, and it's just use this tape, it works.
Right, because that's what people want. We did a nice trial, and people really do think, oh, get the good tape. Get the good tape, and people have an understanding of what that is, but that's all they need to make that decision. So making sure you've got great science behind it, but that you don't bonk people on the head with science they don't want. Just make sure it's in the product.
Yeah, that's your whole thread, right? You weren't truly a scientist, but you went there and then you came back and it's I just really care about improving the life of the person. And if that's the terms they see it in, then that's what matters.
Totally. You want to be the one that has the good tape. At the end of the day, that's what matters.
For sure. We should probably get to Hackathon at some point. So very briefly, how long did you stay in the lab? How long did you do kind of product development, front end, and then how did you get into Hackathon?
Yeah. So a few years of product development, long enough to see some of these projects through and pick up some more projects. And then really this front end piece grew from there into, Liz likes front end things. And so you probably hear that in other interviews too, where people get kind of an exposure. And then if they like it, they continue to seek those opportunities, or other people tap them on the shoulder for them. So I did a little bit more of that. I got involved in a group that was just being stood up. And so I got to stand up a group that focuses on front-end innovation. And that's the program that I manage today. And my exposure to the hackathon was we have a long-standing hackathon tradition. We have an annual 3M hackathon that we do. And it's been put on by our R&D community for, I think over a decade. And really, I got to participate when I was a product developer. And then I got a little bit more involved when I was added to that program and we were starting up, because part of my responsibilities for that program were to help our 3M Hive, which is our Bright Idea site, help them run their hackathon. So help organize. And so I got more into it as an organizer at that time. And then now I kind of lead that, and our steering committee helps serve that hackathon community.
Now, I know you guys do a couple flavors of hackathons, but with the R&D community, are people, hacking on, typically, often we hear hackathons are like this digital thing, but are people hacking with adhesives, hacking with, chemical processes? How does that look, and how's that different?
Yeah, so we have a pretty open-ended call for hackathon. It's really, what do you think is a project that you think if you focused on it for a week and brought in a swath of people from potentially other teams, potentially across the country, just tapping into that incredibly broad technical network, what could you get done? So we've definitely seen a lot in terms of the digital side, a lot in analytics, a lot in, hey, is there a way that we can bring these disparate data sets together and analyze them for some benefit? I think there's also a little bit of what I would call like a technical debt refresh. I've seen that come up in hackathons.
Refactoring. Yep.
Yeah, where it's like, in the process of building different data sets to try to better understand and leverage our incredible history on things like a formulation or things like, a film, whatever it is, how do we do that better? How do we tap into our cross-functional network and do that? And sometimes that means looking at people's data and saying, okay, how do we normalize this? How do we clean this? How do we get it in the right state to be able to do amazing science on our data? Sometimes I've seen that kind of project come up, and that's this mixture of digital and physical because you end up testing the results. But I've seen hackathons to make prototypes. I've seen hackathons that result in kind of a consumer product concept is the output.
I was going to ask, do the marketing folks get involved, or they kind of let the R&D people do their thing and then they kind of look at it later?
I've definitely seen a broad swatch of experiences come in. And funny enough, not all of them, but a decent amount of our marketers have sort of an engineering background. I think something about 3M marketers, right? Like,
sure,
a lot of them are the flavor that went to undergrad as an engineer and decided they wanted to learn more about the business side. So I've seen people that have that, not template necessarily, but that mindset that just love working in a science company. I've seen them get really involved. But application engineers, sometimes our sales team or customer success can get in there. It's primarily driven by our technical forum, but I think I've really seen good cross-functional engagement.
You mentioned front end as your kind of primary role. Can you talk to me about that role more broadly? Like, obviously you're doing the hackathon stuff, but what else falls under that umbrella at 3M?
Yeah, so I lead a test site in our consumer business group, and that test site is called Area 15. And the idea is that we have our 15% culture, which is a staple at 3M. It's this idea that 15% of your time is your directive. You get to own that and deploy it how you will, whether that's engaging in employee resource networks or doing your own project, just kicking it off. And so Area 15 was my director's kind of vision for how do we create this pillar, this more concrete, I would say, embodiment of that culture. How do we support it and put somebody behind it that's in charge of driving it and tending it? And so I was part of that. And really that means creating a place where people's ideas have a home and can move forward. And so that's part of it is being in charge of Hive. So I lead that and lead the steering committee for that. And then another part of it is embedding myself into the teams. People submit ideas and we kind of find out what the ideas are. And then we say, okay, how do we drive these? How do we drive these through a process? So that could mean understanding needs better and meeting with consumers. We have a consumer insights program that's really robust for helping us understand what the needs are and what the attitudes and cultural intersections are and what the trends are, sharpening that, what is the problem, and then going into iterative prototyping and funding a couple of prototyping trials and sample runs and more consumer engagement and in-person testing, starting to understand viability and feasibility and desirability, and then really interfacing cross-functionally to see if there's opportunities to leverage this work. So there's the process, there's the systems piece of it, there's the human piece of it, and getting all of that together and tending that is pretty much the swath of the program that I'm in. Very cool.
If we jump back to hackathons, is there anything you think that's unique about and we can go to the other flavor of hackathon, but with the R&D side, is there anything unique there that you think you do that others might benefit from being aware of?
I think a big part of it is that we have this long-standing culture outside of the hackathon that kind of percolates and gets projects going and, intends to see them through. So we have grants that you can apply for that are senior scientists. So we call them T6s or T7s. They're people that are really our technical leadership, as high as you get on our technical ladder. And that group has money to fund seed projects. So with our hackathons, I think a really cool thing is that people get ready ahead of time. They know what the projects are. They have this withstanding 15% culture. They come into the hackathon, they get to focus and they get to cross-pollinate and make a good step. And then they have a place to go from there where they can continue to use that 15% time. They can continue to influence others on their team to use their 15% time to join the project. They have that burst of visibility that comes out of all the judging. And then they have these other things that they can apply for. So they can submit their idea directly to my program and we can help tend it there in a durable way. They can submit to these other programs that can fund things and give you, from petty cash up to a decent amount of money to do prototyping and trials and get you really good technical advisement as well. So I think the hackathon itself, it's a great experience. It's a week-long carved out time. I think most people see the value, but if I could recommend anything, it's like give these ideas an on-ramp and an off-ramp that helps them live so that you're not inventing stuff, generating a lot of enthusiasm, and then parking lotting all of it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it goes back to when you were working with the undergrads and you don't want to squash their enthusiasm, right? It's like, how do we make sure that this fresh energy and influx of ideas doesn't get killed by corporate red tape or monotony or I imagine for when you had your first project, like kind of exploratory project that got killed, now seeing it from this angle must be really interesting where you're seeing it at scale of all the projects and you can be like, oh yeah, of course, like lots of things get killed, right?
Totally. It is about how do you avoid resoliciting a community for ideas and giving them the impression that there's nowhere for those ideas to go. I think that ultimately is really a morale killer. And so I really appreciate that we have all of these different opportunities to keep things going and frankly, help inventors be satisfied when something's not going to work and you see it firsthand. At 3M, I think that's the only way to kill something because your manager can tell you, hey, we're not going to support this. And you can say, well, I'm going to do it in my 15% time. And that's great. But then you'll do that ad nauseum. So how do we support those people in making progress, making developments, figuring out what's not working, and ultimately deciding for themselves sometimes, like I killed a project, one of my first projects in Area 15 I killed. And frankly, it was me that killed it. And I got to tell the marketer that asked me at the end, so what are the next steps? I got to tell him, like, there aren't any. I'm very satisfied. This is not a consumer product. This is not a thing. So I think that's a huge piece.
I think it's really insightful that you guys have all those other structures surrounding the hackathon. Like you said, the off-ramp to, if someone wants to really keep charging ahead, they can. There's a system for that. If someone needs some more help and assistance, there's systems for that. Someone needs some more budget. I think that's really, really key. I didn't realize that 3M had a formalized 15% program, so that's really cool. One question I have, I know back in the day 3M was famous for sort of asking people to pick kind of the individual contributor route versus the management route. Is that still in place? And can you speak to that? And maybe why, for those who don't know what that is, maybe explain it and explain why you might have that.
Yeah. So there's a dual ladder. And so the ladder is like, okay, you start and you're an intern like me and you hop on some part of the technical ladder and you continue to contribute as an individual contributor. No one reports to you. You may have technical aides or interns or things like that, but you continue as an individual contributor and you achieve some milestones. So these could be launches that you've done or major pieces of progress that signify your growth and signify the impact that you're having. And I think it's important to 3M that ladder goes all the way up. So that T6, T7 community, those are the top rungs in our technical ladder. And those are executives easily. They are people that have this incredible amount of patents, like just an unbelievable number of patents and sales impact from their inventions, and are recognized great mentors and are recognized outside of 3M as an expert in this field, whatever it is that they're in. So they have like the whole stack of this person is just incredible, and they can go all the way up the ladder in that series. There's no ceiling for where a scientist can go with 3M. And then there's the ladder that's what, in my mind, because I'm on the first one, in my world, the other ladder is everything else. And in that everything else ladder, it's a little bit more traditional, what you would think. Like you progress along it, maybe you manage some people, maybe you're an individual contributor, but your impact kind of dictates where you go in the organization there too. And maybe you start leading bigger and bigger teams. So the dual ladder system, you can cross over and back. I've seen people do it. I've seen people like dip a toe on the other rung and come back, or
like, wait, management actually isn't fun.
I do a lot of, as a program manager, I work with a lot of people. I work cross-functionally. There's some mentoring both ways.
And you have to pick a track, right? You pick a track in the first 3 years or something like that, or 5 years. I forget what I read years ago.
I never had like a pick a track day. So okay. I don't know if that has fallen by the wayside. I'll have to ask around. But I never had a pick a track day. I was just installed in a track.
Okay.
And there are points where it's like, okay, you're mature enough in the technical ladder that you could supervise people. And so I think that is the closest thing that I can think of to like the pick a track moment.
I see.
It's like once you advance to a certain degree, you are now qualified to be a supervisor if they let you and you want to.
Yeah, because I know I see it a lot in Silicon Valley of these brilliant technical people, and they're like, oh, I want to make money, so I have to go be a VP. I have to go, and like it's a real shame because they're and I think if honest treatment of the subject would be this person can create value on the technical track, they may be able to create more value on that technical track. So let's leave them on that track and let's make sure that track can compensate them, equivalent to the value they're creating. So I haven't seen that many other places. So that's why I wanted to chat through it with you.
No, thanks for the question. I do think that that's important. Like really ambitious people doing amazing things need a way to grow. So I think it's really important that there are ways to recognize those skills and give people the headspace that they need.
Yep. About this other creative hackathon concept, can you talk to us about that?
You're talking about the learning hacks?
Yeah, the learning hacks.
Yeah, the learning hacks. So learning hacks is really just, we have this hackathon week. It's a time that everyone is blocked off that you can engage in as part of the technical community. And a lot of 3Mers just want to learn. They may not have an active project that they think needs that week, but they want to learn on what's new, what's happening in last year, of course, everyone was thinking about generative AI. So we had a huge learning hack on that where it's just dedicated time. We can bring in an external partner. We can bring in some training. We can bring in some just almost boot camp like environments and use that time that we've carved for the hackathon. You can experience a learning hack too. And so this year we separated them a little bit so you can do the learning hack and the hackathon, and you can intersect and cross-pollinate between the two. I think that that's a piece of the year that a lot of people look forward to.
And can you give us an example? Someone just says, I want to research this area, or give us some more rubber meets the road on what's actually going on and how you set the right context for the learning hack.
I think we have so much latitude to do what we want as a technical community that I've never honestly been concerned that we couldn't do something or would have a hard time describing it or differentiating it. We have a really good culture around, you want to learn something? Great. Let's let's bring in some people. We're going to learn the thing. We have several university agreements where every so often we'll go send people to do a certificate program or a degree, whether it's data science or whatever, what have you. And that happens all the time. So by the time this hackathon comes up, I think we really just think, what is our technical community interested in? We put out a survey in our technical forum, and people across the company are like, I want to learn this. And so, like I said, last year we had generative AI, and a lot of us were really deeply interested in the data, how things are trained, how much energy that's taking. A lot of us are sustainability minded. So we're thinking about, let's learn about how that energy draw is happening and like block chart it out and see if there's areas where we could intervene, if there's areas where, you know, we might be able to leverage this new capability in our daily work. Like I said, we have a ton of data. So a lot of us are thinking, we have data. How do we do that? And just starting the thought, yeah, I'm intrigued is totally the level for a learning hack.
So when someone comes in to speak on a current topic, then does a team actually brainstorm ideas on what they could do in that domain of knowledge? And do they actually start to prototype or explore things, or how far does it go?
Yeah, I think usually you can't get 3 words out of the expert's mouth before our community is like, I could do it with this. Like the brainstorming is constant. And I think it's kind of intense, honestly. Like, you should let the speaker speak for a minute, you know? So I think the second someone starts going, you'll look at the chat and you'll just see so many ideas and so many people tagging each other, like, this would be relevant for that, or, you know, I'm already doing that, look. Or, you know, whatever it is, the people come out of the woodworks and really think about how they're going to leverage things. And then you start to see that in the 15% programs, in these grant proposals, in the tech forum, which we have Senate meetings monthly and people bring up different various projects. You'll see it in my hopper, early ideas. And that's why I kind of emphasized earlier, just this is an all year thing. And then really it's just a focused week. So people do pick up projects, whether it's that day and they just blow off the rest of the day to go work on whatever they want because they're with their friends already, or they start something slower, or they can just consider themselves a satisfied cheerleader. Like, yay, someone is working on this. Amazing. Now I don't have to be out of my lane to know that we're playing in that area. I think 3Mers would love it if we could do everything. So it's nice to know, like, hey, my friend over here, Matt's doing this. It's going to be great coming out of it.
So I know we're going a little long, and I feel like we could do 10 of these episodes with you going into all the details. I'm curious if there's anything you would share as a, you know, kind of a practitioner of these hackathons that you think are really, really key. I love your off ramp. I love the learning hack as a way to kind of, you know, get people, you know, kind of lathered up, so to speak, and they're ready to go. So what, anything else that you would say that practitioners or people running hackathons or people considering running a hackathon, you know, could learn from you?
I'll answer for my team and then I'll answer for me, because I think we have some different points of view that could be helpful. But for the team's perspective, I think you'll never start early enough thinking about what the hackathon's going to be, when it's going to take place, what the theme is, how to get the site going, and thinking through that, getting the organizing team like committed and getting their copy done, all of that stuff that's like the administrative side. I think that that's something where once it's ready, we can hit go and generate excitement, but it has to be ready. So I think that idea of starting early gives you the latitude to do more and to hit your ambitions for it. So I think my team might say that if you asked them. I think for me, it's the making it human. I think a lot of the times hackathons feel, because we're writing copy and because we're a big company and because we're directing them to a website to go sign up, it feels like this kind of non-human thing. It feels like a program or an institution, and it's pretty formal. And so for me, I have a personal goal to make it fun. That's a lot of the point. The point is to connect with each other and keep these projects going or start them, whatever it is. But the point is the human connection, brain to brain, cross-pollination of ideas around the company, just that innovation spirit. So I think that as an organizer, I tend to like try to talk to people about it casually. I really look for these casual opportunities, you know, rather than just having the announcements, rather than just posting things. We've got a larger forum for some of that stuff. I try to go pick people and talk to them and ask how they're doing
humans.
with it. Yeah. See if I can help them, see if I can personally add a little bit of stoke, you know, warm them up a little bit and see what they're interested in and see if I can help, you know, see if, hey, can we get a tool ready for you? And if we're going to work on this, what do we need? And how can we make that 10% better? I think the human side of it is sometimes where I get the most excited and where I think it's easy to skip because you're organizing and it feels like a lot and it's hard to reach out to everybody. But I think making it personal and figuring out as an organizer how you're serving your community and having that lens and making it really like, what's going to be a great experience for you specifically, and making that happen makes the whole thing just come to life in a way that I don't think it would otherwise.
Yep. Well, thanks, Liz, for this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you for, you know, kind of pulling back the veil, letting us hear about your journey, letting us kind of see into one of the world's great innovative companies and some of the actual practices that happen on the ground. And, you know, we have a saying at Bright Idea where we say, stay bright. So I don't think you'll have a problem with that. But look forward to seeing you in person sometime. And I'd love to continue the conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, you two. It's been fun.
Thanks, Liz.
Bye-bye. Well, Margaret, what do you think?
That was awesome. I mean, I know we chatted a lot about her background and her PhD program and material science and stuff that we haven't obviously covered in any other episode. The things that blew my mind, I never thought about the fact that the tape doesn't stick to itself.
Yeah, that you have to design a coating for the back of the tape. It's crazy.
I had to pause and collect myself over the fact that like that's one of those things that I just like missed in the entirety of my life. Never thought about the fact that like why isn't the tape sticking to the back of the tape? So that was one that absolutely blew my mind that I'm gonna have to ruminate about. I thought that Area 15 was really interesting. I want to do some more like research on that. I thought the extreme Post-its were so cool. Post-it extreme cushion wrap. Like the actual end products of this innovation is really interesting to me because, you know, I'm a consumer of these products. And so I think in terms of the episodes, it was really nice to have an episode that was so tangible in terms of the, you know, external results of 3M's innovation and the programs that they put on and the culture and how that supports it. I think my last thing that I thought was really, really valuable is later on in that conversation when she was talking about the project that she herself killed and she was telling it to a marketing manager of like, there's no next steps. This isn't a consumer product. She said it with such like satisfaction and success, talking about the fact that this thing didn't work. And I think that encapsulates this attitude towards innovation is you have to celebrate when things get killed, when things don't work out, when things, you know, were not inevitably going to work. Like that's also success, is getting to that point.
Yep.
And we didn't mention it or say it live when she was talking about that, but it's something that resonated with me. I jotted it down after she was, but I was like, wow, she's got a really great relationship with failure.
Yeah, I think they do such volume of innovation projects. I mean, I think 3M has about 100,000 patents or something like that. So I think there's just more muscle memory, right? They're tinkering with more science projects. They're developing more products. They're testing more, you know, consumer segments and whatnot. So I think, yeah, having that will to kill and recognizing that as a success or recognizing that as a strength and a capability that you have to develop, I think really came through. Yeah. I just love that her whole story just like held together. I mean, she was talking about sewing, and then she was talking about chains of polymers,
and then nano knitting. Yeah.
And
then her
whoa.
yoga bags that she was also making in there, and then going into 3M with some of the consumer product. Yeah, she has a very kind of clear path, and I think this is the first person that we've talked to in innovation that their story makes total sense. You know what I mean? Not to say everyone else's stories didn't make sense, but everyone else's stories were a little roundabout. They kind of tried to found themselves in innovation. And hers, it feels like she was an innovator from the absolute beginning, and her path was pretty clear.
I'm always amazed that these individuals that are so unassuming on the surface, if you might meet them at a party and not get into anything about their work and just think, oh, this is a really nice person I met. But then you start to chase the threads, and like they're doing technical stuff that you can't even comprehend. And then they're, managing teams of people and it's just, and at the kind of the forefront, at the frontier of some of these areas. So it's like, it's amazing when people are that kind of successful and not kind of full of themselves, or not, they're just kind of like, you just seem like a really nice person that you'd love to chat with at a party, and then they have this whole backstory that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I'm gonna go try to be her friend because she's fascinating. I loved our conversation.
Totally. Well, another great episode in the books. I want to thank everyone who's been listening. I've heard stories of people gardening while they're listening to the podcast. I heard stories of people riding in the car. I was surprised I could get it on my Tesla. It comes up in the podcast things. So it's been a ton of fun for us so far. I know we still have a couple more amazing companies and amazing people coming. So Margaret, thanks for being a great partner on this journey, and we'll see you next time.
Blow my mind every conversation. I walk away with something else. The Amtrak one, I was blown away by thinking about the complexity of Amtrak, and now I have to go think about why tape doesn't stick to the back of it. So thank you for letting me do this every week.
Drawer, totally different from now on. So all right, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Synthesize Pod. For more resources on how to bring innovation to the forefront of your organization, sign up for our newsletter at brightidea.com. That's brightidea.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.